Zorin OS began as a small Linux distribution created with a simple goal: make Linux easy enough for anyone coming from Windows to use without frustration. For many years, it remained a relatively niche project known mostly within Linux communities. However, recent developments in the technology world have dramatically changed its position. Today, more Windows users are discovering Zorin OS than ever before, and many experts believe the operating system is experiencing one of the fastest growth periods in its history. What was once considered an alternative for enthusiasts is now being viewed by ordinary computer users as a practical replacement for Windows itself. The reasons behind this shift are complex, but they all point toward a growing desire for simplicity, control, and freedom. As modern versions of Windows continue evolving, many users have become increasingly frustrated by system requirements, mandatory updates, advertising elements, telemetry concerns, and hardware limitations. These issues have encouraged people to explore alternatives they may never have considered in the past. Among the many Linux distributions available, Zorin OS has emerged as one of the most attractive options because it specifically targets users making the transition from Windows. One of the first things that surprises new users is how familiar Zorin OS feels. Unlike many traditional Linux distributions that require significant adaptation, Zorin OS is intentionally designed to resemble the operating systems people already know. The desktop environment includes familiar layouts, recognizable navigation systems, and intuitive controls that reduce the learning curve. For someone who has spent years using Windows, this familiarity can make the transition much less intimidating. The visual design plays a major role in this experience. The developers of Zorin OS invested considerable effort into creating a polished desktop environment that feels modern while remaining approachable. Menus are organized logically, application launching is straightforward, and system settings are easy to access. New users often discover that they can perform basic tasks almost immediately without needing extensive tutorials or technical knowledge. Performance is another factor driving interest. Many users report that Zorin OS runs efficiently on hardware that struggles with newer versions of Windows. Computers that feel slow, unresponsive, or outdated under Windows often experience renewed life when running Zorin OS. This capability is particularly important at a time when hardware requirements continue increasing. Instead of purchasing a new computer, some users find they can extend the lifespan of existing devices simply by changing operating systems. The issue of system requirements has become increasingly significant in recent years. Many users discovered that their perfectly functional computers were unable to officially support newer Windows releases due to processor restrictions, security requirements, or hardware compatibility limitations. For individuals unwilling or unable to purchase new hardware, alternative operating systems became increasingly attractive. Zorin OS positioned itself as a solution that allows users to continue using their computers effectively without expensive upgrades. Privacy concerns have also contributed to the growing interest. Modern operating systems often collect diagnostic information and usage data to improve functionality and security. While these practices are common throughout the technology industry, some users prefer greater control over what information leaves their devices. Linux-based systems generally provide more transparency regarding data collection, and Zorin OS benefits from this perception. Users seeking greater privacy frequently cite this as one of the reasons they decide to make the switch. Software availability has traditionally been one of the biggest obstacles preventing people from leaving Windows. For years, many essential applications were unavailable on Linux platforms. However, the software landscape has changed dramatically. Web-based services now perform tasks that once required platform-specific programs. Cross-platform applications have become increasingly common. Compatibility layers and alternative software options have expanded significantly. As a result, many users discover that nearly all of their daily computing needs can be met without relying on Windows-exclusive programs. The rise of cloud computing has accelerated this trend. Many people now spend much of their time using web browsers rather than traditional desktop applications. Email, document editing, video conferencing, streaming services, project management platforms, and communication tools often function identically regardless of operating system. This shift reduces the importance of platform dependency and makes switching operating systems easier than ever before. Another major factor is security. Linux-based operating systems have long enjoyed a reputation for strong security architecture. While no operating system is completely immune to threats, the Linux ecosystem generally experiences fewer widespread malware outbreaks than Windows. This reputation attracts users who prioritize system stability and security. For many individuals, the prospect of reduced exposure to common threats serves as an additional incentive to explore alternatives. Community support has played a crucial role in Zorin OS's growth. Unlike commercial operating systems that rely primarily on official support channels, Linux communities provide extensive assistance through forums, documentation, tutorials, and discussion groups. New users encountering difficulties often find solutions quickly thanks to the willingness of experienced community members to help. This support network reduces the anxiety associated with transitioning to a new platform. The developers behind Zorin OS have also focused heavily on user experience. Installation procedures are streamlined and accessible. Hardware detection works effectively in most situations. Updates are generally straightforward. The operating system includes many applications users need immediately after installation, reducing the amount of additional configuration required. These design choices help create a positive first impression, which is essential for attracting users unfamiliar with Linux. Education has become another area where Zorin OS is gaining attention. Schools, students, and educational organizations often operate under budget constraints. The ability to install a capable operating system without licensing costs represents a significant advantage. Additionally, older computers that might otherwise be discarded can remain useful for years when running lightweight Linux distributions. This combination of affordability and functionality makes Zorin OS attractive within educational environments. Small businesses have also begun exploring alternatives to traditional operating systems. Licensing expenses, hardware upgrade requirements, and maintenance costs can become substantial over time. Some organizations find that Linux-based systems provide a cost-effective solution for employees whose work primarily involves web applications, communication tools, and office productivity software. Zorin OS appeals to these organizations because of its ease of use and familiar interface. The growth of content creation on platforms such as YouTube has further increased awareness. Technology creators frequently showcase Linux distributions, demonstrating installation procedures, software compatibility, customization features, and performance advantages. Many viewers who previously assumed Linux was complicated discover that modern distributions are significantly more accessible than expected. Zorin OS often receives attention in these discussions because it focuses specifically on attracting newcomers. Customization represents another advantage frequently mentioned by users. While Windows offers personalization options, Linux-based systems generally provide greater flexibility. Users can modify appearance, behavior, workflows, and system components to suit individual preferences. Zorin OS balances this flexibility with simplicity, allowing beginners to enjoy customization without becoming overwhelmed by complexity. Gaming has historically been one of Linux's weakest areas, but this situation has changed considerably. Advances in compatibility technologies have enabled thousands of games to run effectively on Linux systems. While not every title works perfectly, the overall gaming experience has improved dramatically. This progress removes one of the most significant barriers that previously prevented many users from considering Linux alternatives. The psychological aspect of switching operating systems should not be underestimated. For years, many people believed Linux was exclusively for programmers, system administrators, and technology enthusiasts. Modern distributions, such as Zorin OS, challenge this perception. By emphasizing usability, visual appeal, and accessibility, they demonstrate that Linux can serve ordinary users just as effectively as technical experts. As more individuals successfully transition from Windows to Zorin OS, word-of-mouth recommendations continue spreading. Friends recommend it to friends. Family members introduce relatives to alternatives. Online communities share experiences and success stories. This organic growth creates momentum that traditional marketing campaigns often struggle to replicate. Today, Zorin OS finds itself in a unique position. It offers a combination of familiarity, performance, privacy, flexibility, and accessibility at a time when many users are actively searching for alternatives. Whether this trend continues remains to be seen, but one thing is clear. More Windows users are discovering Zorin OS than ever before, and the operating system is rapidly transforming from a niche Linux distribution into a mainstream option for everyday computing. Zorin OS continued gaining momentum as more users shared their experiences online. What began as individual success stories gradually turned into a larger trend that attracted attention throughout the technology community. Forums, social media platforms, video channels, and technology websites started publishing reports from people who had successfully left Windows behind. Many describe the transition as far easier than they expected. Instead of spending weeks learning complicated commands or troubleshooting basic functions, they discovered an operating system that felt familiar from the moment they logged in. One of the biggest reasons for this growing popularity was the maturity of the Linux ecosystem itself. Years ago, many users avoided Linux because essential features were difficult to configure. Hardware support could be inconsistent, software installation often required technical knowledge, and troubleshooting usually involved searching through lengthy documentation. Modern Linux distributions have dramatically improved in these areas. Zorin OS benefited from these improvements by presenting them through an interface specifically designed for everyday users. hardware compatibility became a major selling point. Many users reported that printers, wireless adapters, Bluetooth devices, and external storage worked immediately after installation. This level of compatibility helped eliminate one of the most common fears associated with switching operating systems. People no longer felt they needed advanced technical skills just to connect basic devices. The system handled many tasks automatically, creating an experience closer to what users expected from commercial operating systems. Another factor driving adoption was system responsiveness. Even on older computers, Zorin OS often delivered a smooth and efficient experience. Applications launched quickly, multitasking remained responsive, and system resources were used more efficiently than many users expected. This performance advantage became especially noticeable on aging hardware. Computers that struggled with modern Windows installations frequently gained a second life after switching to Zorin OS. Many users discovered that they no longer needed to upgrade hardware as frequently as before. Instead of replacing an entire computer because the operating system demanded more resources, they could continue using existing devices for years. This benefit became increasingly important as computer prices rose and economic uncertainty encouraged consumers to maximize the value of their technology investments. The software ecosystem surrounding Zorin OS also continued improving. Productivity applications, web browsers, multimedia tools, communication platforms, and creative software became easier to install and maintain. Users who primarily relied on internet-based services often found no meaningful difference between working on Windows and working on Zorin OS. Email platforms, cloud storage services, office suites, and collaboration tools functioned almost identically regardless of operating system. Open source software played an important role in this transition. Applications available at no cost provided alternatives to many commercial programs. Users could edit documents, create presentations, manage spreadsheets, edit images, play media, browse the internet, and perform countless other tasks without purchasing additional software licenses. For students, families, and small businesses, these savings represented a significant advantage. The growing interest in digital privacy also contributed to Zorin OS's rise. Many users became increasingly aware of how technology companies collect and process data. While modern operating systems often include telemetry systems designed to improve products and services, some individuals preferred greater transparency and control. Linux-based operating systems generally provide users with more insight into system behavior, making them attractive to people concerned about privacy. Security remained another major strength. The Linux architecture provides strong separation between user activities and critical system functions. Combined with frequent security updates and community oversight, this approach creates an environment many users consider highly secure. Although no operating system is completely immune to threats, the Linux ecosystem's security reputation helped attract users looking for reliable alternatives. The educational value of switching to Zorin OS also became increasingly apparent. Users who made the transition often gained a deeper understanding of how computers function. Because Linux encourages exploration and customization, many individuals developed technical skills they never expected to learn. Some began with simple desktop usage and eventually explored scripting, networking, system administration, and software development. What started as an operating system change sometimes became the beginning of a broader technological journey. Businesses began paying closer attention as well. Small companies seeking to reduce costs discovered that Zorin OS could provide a practical solution for many office environments. Employees who primarily used web applications, communication platforms, and productivity software often adapted quickly. Reduced licensing costs and extended hardware lifespans created additional financial incentives. While not every business workload was suitable for Linux, many organizations found that a significant portion of their operations could function effectively without Windows. Remote work accelerated these trends. As more employees began working from home, the importance of web-based tools increased dramatically. Video conferencing, cloud collaboration, project management systems, and browser-based applications became central to daily workflows. This shift reduced dependence on operating system-specific software and made alternative platforms more viable than ever before. Customization continued attracting users who wanted greater control over their computing environment. Zorin OS provided flexibility without overwhelming beginners. Users could adjust themes, layouts, workflows, and desktop behavior while maintaining an intuitive experience. This balance between simplicity and customization became one of the operating system's defining characteristics. The gaming landscape also continued evolving. Compatibility technologies improved significantly, allowing more games to run effectively on Linux. While certain titles remained unavailable, thousands of popular games became playable with minimal configuration. For many users, gaming was no longer an automatic reason to remain on Windows. The progress made in this area removed a major obstacle that had existed for decades. Content creators contributed heavily to public awareness. Technology-focused channels regularly featured tutorials, reviews, migration guides, and performance comparisons. Viewers who had never considered Linux before suddenly found themselves watching demonstrations showing how easy modern distributions had become. Zorin OS frequently appeared in these discussions because its design philosophy aligned perfectly with users seeking a familiar alternative. As adoption increased, community resources expanded alongside it. New tutorials appeared daily. User forums became more active. Support communities grew larger and more responsive. So this expanding ecosystem created a positive feedback loop. More users generated more content, and more content helped attract additional users. One particularly interesting development involved people who initially installed Zorin OS alongside Windows, rather than replacing it completely. Dual boot configurations allowed users to experiment without abandoning their existing environment. Many began using Linux occasionally before gradually spending more time there. Over weeks or months, some discovered that they rarely needed Windows at all. Eventually, they transitioned fully to Zorin OS after realizing it met nearly all their requirements. This gradual migration process reduced the fear traditionally associated with switching operating systems. Users no longer felt forced to make an immediate decision. Instead, they could evaluate the system at their own pace, learning gradually while maintaining access to familiar tools whenever necessary. The broader technology industry also played a role. Increasing interest in open source software, digital sovereignty, privacy rights, and user control created conditions favorable to Linux adoption. People began questioning long-standing assumptions about operating systems and exploring alternatives with greater openness than ever before. By this stage, Zorin OS was no longer viewed solely as a niche project for enthusiasts. It had established itself as a legitimate option for students, professionals, families, businesses, and everyday computer users. Its combination of familiarity, performance, privacy, flexibility, and ease of use appealed to a remarkably diverse audience. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of its success was that many users who switched did not consider themselves technical experts. They were ordinary people, looking for practical solutions to everyday computing needs. They wanted a system that worked reliably, respected their preferences, and allowed them to continue using existing hardware. Zorin OS delivered exactly that experience, which explains why interest continued growing at such an unprecedented rate. As more users discovered what modern Linux distributions could offer, the perception of Linux itself began changing. It was no longer seen exclusively as a tool for programmers or enthusiasts. Instead, it emerged as a realistic alternative for mainstream computing. Zorin OS stood at the center of this transformation, helping thousands of users realize that switching away from Windows was not only possible, but often much easier than they ever imagined.